Hello, everyone. Welcome to Her Frame of Mind. This series is crafted with women's experiences at its heart, mothers to be, those who've chosen to remain child free, and anyone navigating the unique mental challenges that come with these journeys. At the same time, it's a resource for everyone partners, friends, fathers, brothers, because understanding these perspectives is what will help us all grow and today, that's going to be it. Her frame of mind matters. And I'm your host, Meenu. And in this episode, we are focusing on mental health in pregnancy and postpartum. Pregnancy and postpartum period are often painted as this joyful and fulfilling time, which it is. But the reality can be much more complex than that. From anxiety and mood swings to postpartum depression, we'll uncover the psychological challenges that are rarely discussed. So, joining us today is Dr. Nivedita Sudhir, a consultant psychiatrist at Therapy, who will guide us through understanding these mental health journeys and how to offer support during this transformative time. Because knowing her frame of mind matters. Hi, Dr. Nivedita. How are you?
Hi, Meenu. Thrilled to be here today. Very excited to kick off this podcast. So shall we start?
Yes, we should begin right away. And my first question for you is why is it important to understand mental health in the context of pregnancy and childbirth? Like, what sets it apart from mental health challenges which could occur otherwise?
Right. So let's talk about pregnancy and postpartum, right? So the term there is a term called peripartum, which means around the time of childbirth, and that includes both pregnancy as well as the postpartum period, right? So normally when you look at any mental health condition, so for example anxiety or depression, who does that affect? It affects the individual who is experiencing the symptoms, right? Whereas when you look at it in the context of pregnancy or postpartum during this whole period, it not just affects the mom, it also there's an effect on the fetus, on the pregnancy outcomes. There's an effect on the child or the adolescent once that infant grows up. There is also an effect on the other children in the family, right? So if it's not the first pregnancy, if it's the second or third pregnancy, then the other children get affected if the mom is ill. And finally, for us as mental health professionals who work with these individuals, it's also unique because treatment is very different, right?
Correct.
From not being pregnant to being pregnant, or breastfeeding or not breastfeeding. All of these have to be taken into account while making a plan for treatment.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, because it's not just one bill will fit everybody. This has to be like a very, very customized thing.
Absolutely. And pregnancy and the postpartum journey as well as breastfeeding, all of these are very unique situations, with very unique processes that happen in the body, and therefore they have an interaction with everything else in the person's within and around the person. Right?
Yeah, like we're not going to be in a void, sort of like not getting affected or not affecting, other factors in our life. It's going to be like a multitude of things that come around and we have to deal with all of that. So, what are some key aspects that we need to be mindful of when it comes to mental health during pregnancy and postpartum?
Right. So I'll just to add on to your first question, I just want to talk about, when you said what's unique, and I told you that it not just affects that person, but affects the fetus, the pregnancy. So there's a lot of considerable amount of research that's happening and has happened up to now. And a lot of studies show, right, that, things like women who have depression during pregnancy often have preterm delivery. So that's delivering before around 37 weeks. And we know that preterm deliveries itself can lead to complications, both especially for the baby, but as well as in the mom. Right. So that is one thing that may occur in terms of pregnancy. In terms of the development itself, right? Research has shown that it can affect all aspects of development. Right, so we're not just talking about the brain development here. We're talking about emotional development of the baby. We're talking about intellectual development or cognitive development, as we say. We're talking about physical growth and development. So all of these domains are affected by maternal mental health. And therefore, because it's so wide and far-reaching, it's significant to be considered. Now, let me give you another example, right? There's a lot of talk these days, especially on there's a lot of chat on social media about attachment and attachment styles, right? I'm sure we've all come across this.
Absolutely.
Right? So, what is attachment, right? So, attachment is simply something like when a young child uses a caregiver. So, it could be a parent or anybody who's very close to the child as a secure base from which they can go around and explore the world, as well as a safe haven to come back to for us as a source of comfort. So that is what attachment is, right? So you see young kids, right? Typically they're glued on to mom or dad, right? So when you take them to a new place or they're in a meeting a new person, initially they're clinging on to the parent and they're peeking from behind the parent. Right? So I have a toddler who does this all the time, right? And so she wants to look around and see what's happening. And once she's comfortable, she goes and explores the park or the playground or somebody's house that we are in, right? And similarly, when the child again, is hurt or is scared, they come back to the parent, right? So that is what attachment is, and that's what we're talking about when we talk about attachment. This is normal. This is a good attachment to have, right? But because of various factors, this kind of attachment may not happen, and that's when we talk about, say, insecure or disorganized attachment. And unfortunately, when the caregiver, especially the mother, right, oftentimes in a lot of societies becomes the default parent, right? So so because of all of these things, if the mother's mental health is for whatever reason affected, right, be it with anxiety or be it with depression or be it with any other form of mental health issues, then this attachment gets disrupted. This form of typical attachment gets disrupted, right? Maybe the mother is so caught up with their own symptoms, they're not able to respond to the child. Right? We talk about where the mother is not sensitive to the needs of the child, or the mother is too protective because of her own anxiety, her own fears, right? So all of these can lead to complications in the form of attachment that the child has with the parent, and that in turn will have an effect on the child's future emotional development, as well as the child when the child grows up and has their own relationships.
Correct.
Even the initial attachment with the caregiver or the parent, that will sort of play out in other relationships also. So that's why it's really important to talk about and to understand mental health and mental
definitely.
In this
case. We have seen that so many times during sessions also as well, right? When an adult, a young adult comes to you saying that they are not able to form good, secure relationships with any of their partners, and then the more we explore, we understand that during their childhood, they did not have a replica of it. They did not have a base that they probably could replicate it to their future. So it's such a complicated network, right? There are so many things that you need to take care of since like the very, very beginning of the child's development.
Yeah. So while there's also, I also want to point out that while, when we talk about it like this, it seems so complicated. It seems so, there are so many things at play. There's so many things that could go wrong, perhaps.
Yeah.
So I want to point out that this is so beautiful. It's all kind of pre-programmed in our nature that usually by default, a lot of these things we do and it goes right.
Yeah.
We've never thought about it, but it's happened. You have most of us say who've had fairly, normal or upbringings we do have that kind of secure attachment, right? So I think what we're trying to also do with this pod is not just to point out problems, but I also want to point out that these are also things that happen. And I think we're just making people aware that such and such thing exists, and
Yeah.
making them cognizant of these things.
Definitely, definitely. It is to eliminate all possibilities, that anything could go wrong. Because things are going right, might as well make sure that even the smallest thing is not going wrong, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, we were talking about key aspects, that are important for mental health during pregnancy. So, we are talking about what are like you said right now, attachment, right? The way a child forms the attachment. So, what are some other things that probably, are important and we need to be mindful of when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum?
Right. So let's start with this whole journey of getting pregnant and, finding out you're pregnant. It's like uncharted waters for most people, especially for first time parents, right?
Correct.
And I think I can speak from like both personal experience as well as, people who I've worked with, as well as friends who kind of shared their experiences. And a lot of us have genuinely just been anxious, like, oh, okay, now I'm pregnant. What happens next, right? Because these are not things that you talk about routinely. These are not like nobody gives you a checklist, prepares you for this. There's no induction class in that sense. So I think some amount of anxiety, some amount of being a little scared is normal, right? And that's important because a lot of people, like, there is this whole thing about being, pregnancy being joyful and very happy, and I mean, I completely agree. Pregnancy is a wonderful experience, and it's beautiful, and it's something that is precious. But at the same time, I think we also need to acknowledge that there is a component of anxiety, a component of fear that a lot of, especially first-time parents, undergo. Okay, it's also a time of transition, both in terms of your role in your family, or a time of transition within for the woman, right? Because there are a lot of hormonal changes going on, and physical changes, body image changes. So all of these are all dynamic situations during pregnancy, and therefore some amount of anxiety, some amount of fear, worry, all of that is normal, right? But what to watch out for, right? So that is more important. So if somebody finds themselves being very worried and very anxious to the extent that it's kind of interfering with their functioning, right? They're not able to get on with routine work, routine life, or somebody is appearing very depressed, constantly having a lot of negative thoughts, like always on the seeing only the downside of things, or not eating, not sleeping, or having self-harm thoughts. Those are really things that you have to watch also, right?
Got it.
So we talk about depression in pregnancy. It's quite common, right? It's not as rare as you might think. It's in fact 1 in 4 people, so that's around 25% people experience depression in pregnancy.
Okay, that's a huge number actually.
Yeah, that's a really big number, and around 15% people experience postpartum depression.
Okay.
Right? So again, like these are significant numbers to acknowledge, right? So now coming to the postpartum period, right? So there's pregnancy depression that starts during pregnancy, and there is a depression that can start after childbirth, right? So now we commonly heard about, I'm sure you've heard of baby blues.
Oh yes, definitely.
Right? So baby blues or postpartum blues, this is more of a common phenomenon. It's seen in about 80% of the women. So this is something like a low feeling overwhelmed, feeling irritable, or a lot of mood swings, or just crying, just for no reason, right? And this typically starts around day 3, 4, 5 after giving birth. So typically, most people are discharged on day 2 or 3 after childbirth, and once you come home, this feeling kind of sinks in. It's also a combination of factors, being overwhelmed, being tired, sleep deprived, pain, all of this. But this is a transient situation. It kind of resolves by itself say by day 10 maximum.
Okay.
If these symptoms are persisting, right, beyond say 2 weeks, or even in the initial bit itself, if they're very significant, right, again, if it's affecting the woman's ability to function, if it's affecting their role as a caregiver for an infant, then again, these are signs that there is a disorder, that this is not cannot just be accounted for by, oh, this is normal
Right.
hormone.
Yeah.
ठीक हो जाता है. This is not that kind of a. So these things need to be addressed. So this is
Got it.
talking about depression, right? So I just want to take a couple of minutes, if I may, to just talk about what are the other illnesses. So depression is the most common, but there can be psychosis, there can be OCD, there can be eating disorders, or other anxiety disorders. Anything can be a part of a pregnancy or postpartum period, or what we initially spoke about, right? The perinatal period. Although depression is the most common, I think postpartum psychosis, while it's very rare, it's something that we have to keep in mind, because it can be associated with a little bit of aggression towards the infant, sometimes self-harm thoughts in the woman. Yeah, and the other thing that I want to raise here, and that is something that's really important for all of us to remember, is that postpartum depression is an important cause for suicide, right? And therefore that needs to be kept in mind, right? So if you see somebody, a woman that you know who is recently delivered, who is struggling with her mental health, please seek help. Right? If there is no harm in seeking help, you seek help, and if it's something, and if it's something trivial, or well, not trivial, but is not the right word, but if it's something that is not very severe, then that's fine. You'll get reassured by the mental health professional who's treating you. But it shouldn't be that it's something that's significant, that's severe, and has been ignored. So that's what I'm saying. There's harm in asking for help. So please reach out. There are multiple, online, offline sites and resources. I think we can share a couple with the link to this podcast.
Definitely.
Resources, available, which are there to help women, especially postpartum women who are, fighting these symptoms. And often it's difficult because some of the symptoms include like guilt, include things like, perhaps, I'm not doing anything good for the baby. Maybe, the baby is better off without me, and these kind of thoughts, which a person might be trying to fight off, but, might also overwhelm that person sometimes. So I think these are things that we should keep in mind. And so I think we've covered most of the symptoms.
Yeah. So we're talking about, what we need to be mindful of. Do you think there are certain individuals who are more at risk?
Right. So I think there is a subset of people perhaps who are more at risk, people with a family history of mental illness, especially depression. People who have had depression in the past. I think that's again something that we talk about. And people who have something called as PMDD, or premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So that's like a more severe form of PMS. PMS is something like most people experience it. PMDD is a more severe form, which requires, again, professional help and treatment. So if somebody has been diagnosed with PMDD, then there is a likelihood that they will develop some form of mental illness in the peripartum period. Apart from that, of course, people with difficult pregnancy, complicated pregnancy, unplanned pregnancies, pregnancies especially which occur in, say, young adolescents. I think these are also at-risk groups.
Got it, got it. All right. So then there are certain categories of individuals who are more at risk, and whoever the social support, socio-political climate,
Social support.
every single thing, right? Like all of these, we probably need to, keep an eye out for, just to
Absolutely.
ensure that they have a smooth process going on. All right.
Yeah.
So now we know that a lot of pre-existing mental health issues can impact pregnancy. So why do you think it is important to address them before or during this phase?
Right. So I think what we spoke about up until now was mostly about new mental health conditions that may pop up during pregnancy or in the postpartum period. Right? But there's also going to be a subset of people who've had mental health challenges in their 20s and 30s who then go on to become pregnant. Right. So what is important and what needs to be taken care of in those things. While normally also planned pregnancy is ideal, I think it's more important if you are someone who's had a history of having mental health challenges. It's important to have a planned pregnancy because then you and your mental health team can kind of make a plan around it. Go in knowing that, okay, chalo, I'm at a little more risk than the other person. So let me have like one Raksha Kavach, I suppose you could say. So that is where planning definitely helps. So certain people who are on certain kinds of medication, not all medications, but certain kinds, and I think your doctor will tell you which medications, you will have to plan to either change the medication, reduce the dose, or stop that medicine. These are all this discussion needs to be had with your psychiatrist before you can get pregnant. Another very important thing is, say, ho gaya by chance, you're pregnant, right? And this happens. And you're on medication. It's important to inform both your obstetrician, so that is the OBGYN who you're consulting, as well as the psychiatrist that you're pregnant. Right? Because we see that a lot of times I'm taking some pills, especially neend ka goli, sleeping pill, small dose, I take it occasionally, and then I've been taking for the last 6 months, 7 months some medication for depression, anxiety, but it's failed to mention to the obstetrician, and that is problematic. Right? Because your doctors need to have all the relevant information. So both ways. The obstetrician needs to know your psychiatric history. The psychiatrist needs to know either your plans to get pregnant or your, if you are pregnant / breastfeeding person. These are important discussions to have. So finally, I think it's like as a team, you need to have a team around you. So that includes all of these people, essentially.
Okay, that's such a well said thing, right? When you are, it takes a village to raise a baby. So might as well form that village way, way before you are getting the child into this world, right? So it could be, mental health professionals, it could be medical professionals, anybody and everyone, right? So one extra hand, if that's going to be more helpful, why not utilize it? So basically, that's the main, thing we should take back from.
Absolutely. I think you summed up. If there is one take I would love for our listeners to take away from them, it is that start building that village early.
Oh right? My God, yes.
Put as many people as possible in that village. Start early and get professionals involved. No harm in that.
Yeah, definitely. So like when we are talking about village and when we're talking about the safety network and all of that, there is obviously a part of the woman's life that is also going to change while the network is being formed and all of that. So a huge part of their regular life at that point is probably going to be with their partners, right? So intimacy and the kind of connection that they have with their partner, there are going to be a lot of changes that will happen during and after pregnancy. So what is your comment on that? So what do you think happens over there?
I think sex and intimacy during pregnancy and postpartum again is one of those issues that is hardly discussed, if ever. right?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not discussed in families, but even with I think the gynacs, people are hesitant to discuss it. When it comes to sex during pregnancy, in sex and intimacy during pregnancy, I think that is entirely in the territory of the gynac. If there are certain situations in which the gynac might put a restriction on intercourse, and then there are certain situations where it's okay. So I think everybody must check with the gynecologist, the obstetrician who is taking care of that. In terms of, and of course, as ever, the partner's comfort, right? So both partners need to be comfortable, and that's about, from my perspective, that is about the sex and intimacy part during pregnancy. But come to postpartum, right? So again, like we discussed, postpartum is a period of transition, of change, for both partners, right? Transition in their relationship. They're going from being just partners to parents now. There is transformation for the woman from within, in terms of, change in her body image, change in the way essentially that she sees herself, right?
Yeah.
There is this dual role now that, as a mother or as a wife, or as a partner. And there is also the environmental setting. So all of these kind of are factors that affect sex and intimacy in the postpartum period.
Right.
So again, initially, I think once the OB clears the woman for intercourse, then I think it's about finding a comfortable space. When I mean space, I'm not just talking about the physical space, which of course is important, but also finding a comfortable space with your partner. So it's like exploring your relationship anew. If there is a male partner who's listening to this pod, what I say is, discuss this with your partner. Treat it like, maybe a new relationship, right? So start slow, right? There is you can start with a lot of in bonding, emotional bonding, talking, spending time. These things are more difficult after you have a child. You're not spending as much time with each other. Even the time that is spent with each other, you're talking about more mundane issues, right? Or you're discussing the baby, right? So there is very little time to discuss yourselves. But I think it's important to prioritize the relationship. Find time, make time, prioritize the relationship, find your comfort, go slow. Right? And I think both partners can help each other in discovering a new level of comfort. That's what, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to take it, right? Instead of looking at it as, oh, we need to now adjust with whatever it is, a new person is there with us and we need to adjust ourselves around it. Why not make it a new dynamic, right? Why not make it, this person is there now, we care about this person, so now let's make a new dynamic. It's also exciting when you look at it that way, right? A lot of people are out there, there are things that people do, such as, let's go out on a date pretending that it's our first date. So that is something that sparkles and rekindles a lot of things. So it could be seen as one of those things. Definitely.
So I think as a relationship, the emotional fabric of the relationship itself changes. I think even the sexual component will change, and I think it's just that in postpartum.
Right? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So now that we have looked at all these aspects, let's say that for people who are listening, who may know of other people also who probably are going through this phase in their life, what are some red flags or warning signs that probably will indicate that this person needs to seek professional help during their term?
Right. I think if we have to summarize, all that we've spoken about in the last, 20 odd minutes, I'd like to say that red flags, absolutely. If you are having self-harm thoughts, or if a new mother has confessed to you about having self-harm thoughts, or any sort of aggressive impulses towards tell towards the baby, please seek immediate professional help. Right? There is no other recourse that is ideal in this situation. Right? The next thing would be if the symptoms are, if you feel like, so if you're confused, say, is this normal? Is this just hormonal fluctuation? Is this something that will pass? Or is this something more significant? A thumb rule would be, is it affecting the person's routine life? Right? Are they finding it difficult to function? Are they not functioning? So when I say are not functioning, meaning are they not able to keep up with whatever their daily tasks or whatever is required of them on a daily basis. So for a woman who's going to work, maybe it's inability to go to work or perform at work, or maybe for a woman who's at home, it's just that maybe it's becoming difficult to attend to the needs of the baby or attend to herself. She's neglecting herself, right? Not having a bath for like basic hygiene is not being maintained, not having a bath. And these are all red flag signs. There's a third scenario, which is, you are able to function, you are able to keep up with your daily needs and demands, but it's taking a huge toll out of you, right? So previously, if you worked at, say, 70 to 80%, you could meet all your essential daily requirements, whatever you had to do on a day. But now it's requiring more than 100% effort, like a lot more effort to just function. Then you know that this is a struggle, and please seek professional help.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think these are generally the red flags that one must. And anywhere where it's been there for a while, it's not going away. Again, duration, right? Severity and duration. If both of these are on the extreme, please seek help immediately.
Got it. I think that was very crisp and very informative. So. Now to just wrap this all up, a lot of people, could say it is obviously a thought that can come up that pregnancy and delivering babies has been happening for thousands of years and it's a very natural phenomenon, right? So why are we complicating it with all this jargon? Is this really necessary? Is this really important?
And thank you for that question. I think it's really important that you kind of brought this up, and I'm glad that this is a space where we can discuss this. So if you tell me that procreation or reproduction is normal, all animals do it, all humans do it. Essentially, the human race is thriving, and all thanks to this phenomena. So why are we now medicalizing it? People have been giving childbirth for generations, thousands of years. Why are we suddenly talking about all of this? Why is there so much medicalization happening? And that's a fair point, right? I completely agree with that, right? But now let's look at it another way, right? What I'm saying is that previously there wasn't a lot of knowledge perhaps about mental health itself, but more specifically also about mental health challenges in pregnancy and postpartum, right? In fact, even now, even amongst the medical community, it's still in the very nascent stages, right? So it's only that it's kind of being spoken about openly in forums such as this, right? And therefore, information is there, information is available, right? And we have to use it. So let me give you an example. At the beginning of the 20th century, right? So in the early 1900s, there were no antibiotics. There was essentially there was no knowledge about how infectious diseases happen, and there wasn't any so there weren't any vaccines, right? Of course, the human race was still thriving. Okay, there were like millions of people around the world, but there were also a significant number of people who were being taken away by infectious diseases. Today we have vaccines. Today we have a knowledge and understanding about these illnesses, and we know how to treat them, cure them, and antibiotics have saved countless lives, right? So it's the knowledge that has enabled us to do even better. Right? So are we now going to say that prior to the 1900s human race was thriving, तो अभी antibiotics के साथ क्या Naya kuch nahi hua. That's not the case, right?
Yeah.
And knowledge has definitely improved our lives.
Right.
Similarly, that is what we're trying to say. Knowledge is power. Use it. We have it on our hands. Please, let's use it. Nobody wants to unnecessarily medicate a person. Nobody wants to give labels. But that being said, if there is somebody who is able to use this information, use this awareness to, identify a problem either within themselves or in somebody around them, that's great. And I think that is essentially